Pope Francis ignored him completely. But now Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano makes Fox News and even gets a tweet from Donald Trump. A former leader of Black Lives Matter warns that globalists are behind rioting in America. And finally, an influential pro-life African asks Nancy Pelosi to stop treating her people like children. All that and more tonight from the editor's desk. Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Mack coming to you once again from the offices of the Remnant newspaper. Okay, so here we go. Things are really heating up here in America as the re-election of Donald Trump now looms on the horizon, and everyone's seeming to come up with various ways of making sure that the Donald does not make it back into the White House, or at least that's how it seems to us. Our Democrat friends have got one trick after another these days. First, we had the national lockdown, the economic shutdown, and now we've got a real live race war going on. What next, guys? Invasion of the body snatchers?
You fools! You're in danger! Can't you see? They're after you!
But it's okay, because O'Brien is turning down the dial, and Winston Smith can finally get himself a haircut with just a few social distancing measures.
Zo, Miran, ik ga niet even kammen. Ja. Even kijken wat het klinkt. Lekkere. Oh, heerlijk. Lekker warm. Zo.
I mean, it's just a slight exaggeration. But all kidding aside, things are really, really strange right now. And we've been talking about this stuff for so long. Chaos in the streets, race wars, the police state on the horizon. It's all coming, isn't it? But here's the thing, friends. We don't want to say or do that which is going to empower a very small minority. And it certainly is not all black. I'm seeing a lot of white spoiled brats from the suburbs in there too, breaking windows and doing everything else. So let's take a look at what's really going on here. The reality is this crisis is largely a media production, complete with narrators, producers, cameramen, right? Dramatic music. We see only exactly what they want us to see. But if you think about this, and every now and then this actually happens, you'll see them zoom out. And what happens when they zoom out from those aerial shots over one of these protests in one of the major cities in America? They zoom out a little bit, and what do we see? We see empty streets. We see quiet neighborhoods. And millions of Americans are there, black and white, who just want to go back to a football game, who just want to go to work. They're not into this. But you drop a camera into the middle of that, and you throw some fire and some violence and F words all over the buildings and all of this stuff, and you get the impression the entire world is crashing down around us. But is it? You see, friends, I don't care if you're black, white, yellow, red. We're all being manipulated. You see? And our country is being destabilized intentionally. And the question is, how long can they sustain this? How long can they sustain this? Sky is falling, everybody's dying, and news reports just came in, everybody's dying, it's just a matter of time. How long are we going to keep buying this stuff? We saw through the lockdown, the pandemic, we saw through Tony Fauci and the scarf lady, right? And we're starting to see through this. The riots are already losing steam. Now, they're very serious. I'm not trying to minimize this problem because they're indicative of an international crisis and a crisis of philosophy, a crisis of theology, a crisis of politics. Yes, but the riots are losing steam. Even that Antifa reality TV show that's going on in Seattle right now is starting to lose a little gas. You notice this? Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano's open letter to Donald Trump is all over Fox News.
Gregory's rebuke of the president was noticed by the Roman Archbishop Carlo Vigano, who praised President Trump for his leadership. He condemned Catholic leaders who are working against President Trump. Vigano wrote this to President Trump, who he sees as an ally in the fight of good versus evil, saying it is disconcerting that there are bishops who, by their words, prove that they are aligned on the opposing side. They are subservient to the deep state, to globalism, to align thought, to the New World Order, which they invoke ever more frequently in the name of a universal brotherhood which has nothing Christian about it. but which evokes the Masonic ideals of those who want to dominate the world by driving God out of the courts, out of schools, out of families, and perhaps even out of churches.
That letter, we published it in the Remnant. You know, Archbishop Vigano asked us to publish it. We published it. It's gone all over the place. LifeSite News published, a couple of traditional Catholic news outfits published it, and it went everywhere. You see, things are changing. People are waking up. A couple of days after that letter was posted, a couple of days, Donald Trump himself tweeted his recommendation that everyone read Archbishop Vigano's letter. Thank the Archbishop for it. Remember, this is one of the chief critics of the pontificate of Pope Francis, Archbishop Vigano. And the President of the United States tweeted his support for this man. And again, don't forget, Vigano used to work for Pope Francis just in 2016, a couple years back. He was arguably the third most powerful man in the Vatican. He's not some schlep out there with his little tinfoil hat on and a bunch of conspiracy theories like America magazine wants to make him out. He was working for the Pope as late as 2016. And people say, well, now he just wants to keep himself relevant, so he's saying all sorts of crazy things. He retired. He submitted his retirement at the right age, and Francis accepted it. If he's just a guy that wanted more attention for himself, he would not have done that. So now Vigano is warning Donald Trump essentially that even Pope Francis is part of this deep church. Not the deep state, but the deep church. Is this an exaggeration? I would say not, unless you make it an exaggeration so that you don't have to face the reality of what's happening in the Vatican right now. It's not an exaggeration. Minneapolis was still in flames. It was still smoking when Pope Francis put in a high-profile telephone call that everybody in the mainstream media reported on. Put in a telephone call to this guy, El Paso, Texas Bishop Mark J. Seitz, whose Black Lives Matter promotional photo had evidently made it all the way to the Vatican. So what do we make of this? The Pope must support Black Lives Matter, right? Otherwise he wouldn't have done this. And Black Lives Matter says that what Black Lives Matter actually stands for, and this is on a new mural that everyone's been talking about in D.C., which was put there by the mayor of D.C. and by the D.C. chapter of Black Lives Matter. It stands for, wait for it, defund the police. I guess Pope Francis is going to be okay, like all the other ruling elites, with his personal security force, the Swiss Guard. They're going to be fine. He'll be fine. But thanks a lot, Your Holiness, for encouraging a group that wants to defund the police now, at least here in Minneapolis, certainly. Listen, we've gone over this before, and it's so necessary to make sure we set the tone correctly. Everyone agrees that George Floyd, who of course was a felon, who was a guy who was trying to get his life back, and who, as we said in the last show, was also unemployed thanks to this ridiculous economic lockdown in this country. But in any case, no matter what you think of George Floyd, he didn't deserve to die like that. He didn't deserve to die at all. You know, he died because of a clear-cut case of police brutality. Let's think about this cop who killed George Floyd. I tweeted it out right that night because you know what I saw? Guess what, guys? I didn't see all the color everybody else is talking about. I saw a cop kneeling on the neck of another man, and it terrified me. It didn't terrify me because it was white on black. It terrified me because of the inhumanity of man to man now that we're seeing in the streets of our own cities. You know what that means? If people can sit around and watch something like that happen, what about little kids who had seen that? This is horrific. So yeah, there's some really bad cops out there. Does this mean that we need to shut down the police forces of America? Does this mean that all or even most cops are bad? Please. The vast majority of cops in this country put their lives on the line every day for all of us. And because, as we talked about last time, there is no moral code anymore, it's an extremely difficult thing to do. You ever arrest somebody? I've arrested somebody. And if the person is resisting arrest and you have to take them to the ground, it's a brutal thing, believe me. Anybody taking pictures of that is going to think, oh my gosh, that's police brutality. Because it's not an easy thing to arrest somebody who doesn't want to be arrested. Nor is it an easy thing for cops these days to police streets teeming with people, black and white, who don't believe in a moral code, who've never even heard about the Ten Commandments, have no idea what it means to be moral, who think that morality means whatever you can get away with is good. You want to try to police that situation sometime? You think it's going to be better if we have nobody trying to enforce the law of the land in these cities? Look what happened in Minneapolis. They pulled the police out. It looks like Baghdad after the invasion, after the shock and awe. The place looks like it's been bombed because what happened? liberal Democrat decisions happened. They pulled the police out, and the mob went crazy, black and white, that night. You know? So these cops who are trying to do this, my friends, pray for them. Pray they don't go away, because they are the last line of defense in this country, this godless country. You know? Like this hero cop gunned down by a peaceful protester.
Dave Dorn spent 38 years of his life protecting and serving in the St. Louis City Police Department. But tragically, the 77-year-old Dorn was murdered around 2:30 this morning. He was shot and killed by a looter. Dorn was working security at Lee's Pawn Shop on Martin Luther King Drive. He died on the sidewalk.
You know how many police, how many black people, how many black cops have been shot over the past couple of weeks now? Even the liberals know that this anarchy cannot continue and that disbanding the police department is only going to make it exponentially worse. Here's our poor, ill-fated, feckless mayor of Minneapolis, who famously designated March 10th, by the way, as Abortion Providers Appreciation Day. Here he is getting booed off the streets of his own city.
I do not support the full abolition of the
all right, get the out of here. Go, get out of here. Go home. Go home, Jacob. 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 Go home.
So yeah, Black Lives Matter. And yeah, police reform to the extent that you have some cops that have gone off the rails. Yeah, we want to make sure we never see another cop like the one in Minneapolis who knelt on the neck of George Floyd and killed him. Nobody wants to see a cop like that ever again. So if it takes some sort of reform to the police departments, do it, and do it now. But don't pretend like liberal policies haven't brought this about. I mean, the liberals have been dominating these cities for 40 years. Joe Biden, how long has he been in office? 44 years or something? And now he's going to come in and fix racism. What have you been doing, Joe, for the past 4 decades? You know, now you're going to fix it? The policies of these Democrats, these leftists, these liberals are tearing our cities in half right now. And if the police departments are disbanded, like some of these nut jobs are now suggesting, make no mistake, friends, it's going to be Mad Max first, and then it's going to be very quickly thereafter 1984. Because ironically enough, disbanding the police departments of America is the fastest route to the police state that we've been dreading for a long time. We want change too. Believe me, we do not want a police state. And if we could disband the police, if we ever went back to sort of the Christian model, we went back to Christendom, where we didn't need a police force, where people knew that they had to be answerable in the eyes of God, that would be great. So in a sense, I agree. I hope someday we get to the point where we can disband all police forces and we can live in a Christian society according to the law of God. But that's not there yet. Why? Because there is no moral code now on the streets of America since we kicked God out of the public schools. Yeah, we got rid of him, which means we got rid of his law, which means we got rid of natural law, which means we got rid of the foundation of jurisprudence, of the foundation of our code of conduct that we've had for a couple of 100 years, that goes back to the Magna Carta and beyond, that goes back to Mount Sinai, Moses talking to God. We decided we're so enlightened, we just don't need that. So we threw it out of the public schools. Outfits like the Southern Poverty Law Center so proud of themselves because they tore down Judge Roy Moore's 10 Commandments monument in front of his courthouse down in Alabama. Nice job, guys. Look how that's panning out. We have moral anarchy. You know what that does? You know what moral anarchy does? It leads to all men and women, I don't care what their color is, tearing each other apart, treating each other like animals.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching. Please remember on your way out to go ahead and like this video and also subscribe to this channel. That'll help us out so much. And then if you want to be alerted every time there's a new Remnant TV video, click the little bell icon that you'll find next to your subscribe button, and that way you'll never miss another Editor's Desk episode. Thanks so much.
What they're now telling us, and they're going to change the Webster's Dictionary to reflect some of this, if you're white in America, you are a white supremacist. Even if you don't intend to be, even if you don't want to be, even if you don't know you are, you are. And when we get to that point, if that becomes accepted, well, there's nothing you can do about it. Cattle car these people, get them out of here. Because they're haters and they don't even know how to stop. It's hardwiring, it's genetic. You're genetically hardwired to be a racist, is what they're saying. You think this is going to improve race relations one way or the other? And if you deny that you're a racist, if you deny that you're a white supremacist, you're only proving their point. Because you're so ignorant, you don't realize it. You don't even see it. What do you do with this? This is insanity. And we can come up with all sorts of rational reasons. I don't know if anybody's listening anymore. I'm a Catholic. My religion teaches that God made all of us, made each one of us in his own image and likeness. Black, white, brown, whatever. Now think about this for a second. If you truly think you're a Catholic, you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you're a good Christian, to hate or to look down upon a fellow human being merely because he's the wrong skin color would be blasphemous. It would be a blasphemous insult to Almighty God, the God who created him in the first place. You're saying God made a mistake. Why did God make a black person? That black person can't help that he's black any more than I can help that I'm white. You know whose fault it is? It's God's fault. Racism is inherently anti-Christian. And the Son of God now, he founded the Catholic Church. He founded the Christian religion, which is the least racist organization in the history of the world. And we can prove that quite easily. Every culture, every human being, regardless of skin color, makes up the body of Christ, the church, and the communion of saints as well, by the way.
Far from the splendor of the Vatican, Sister Maria shepherds her students into class. The children are indigenous Maya, and they come from one of the country's poorest regions. But Sister Maria is determined to give them a good start.
It's important that children at this age develop in a holistic way, intellectually and spiritually. It's an important stage, and we're here to help them overcome any problems they might face.
Racial hatred is a mortal sin against the fifth commandment of God. It also violates one of the two great commandments of God. You're really in trouble if you're going to go around judging people by the color of their skin and then claiming to be a Christian. You're either nuts or you're a total fraud. And if you're a fraud, why bother claiming to be a Christian? Just go be the little hedonist that you want to be. Because you know what? I'm talking a lot now about how we're supposed to kneel to black people. Well, you know what? I've done that. I've knelt to a black man many times when I confessed my sins to him. Now, if I'm a white supremacist, how does that work? How do I kneel down in front of a black priest and ask this black man to look into my heart, to forgive my sins, and to tell me what I got to do to save my soul? How does that work? You can say, well, you're just making that up. You're just trying to sound... Okay, is it probable? Is it probable that if you had such hateful feelings in your heart for a person who's not the same color skin as you are, that you'd go to confession to him, that you would let him lead you spiritually? Is that probable? And probably Jesus Christ did not look like me, by the way. I'll bet he wasn't a pale-skinned German-Irish guy, right? You know? Traditional Catholics. I'll put some images on the screen. How could 20,000 white supremacists with tears of joy streaming down their face, joy and gratitude, kneel behind a black cardinal of the Catholic Church, a high-ranking cardinal of the Catholic Church, a friend of the Pope's? How could we do that and let him lead us to the altar of God at the premier event of our year, the Sharp Pilgrimage? You see, I'm getting a little sick of this. I'm getting a little sick of this, and I know all of you are too. This projection of racism on everybody else. Our religion teaches us to be colorblind. That's what we have to do in order to remain in the good grace of Almighty God. You know, civil rights leaders, they like to quote the Bible. Martin Luther King quoted the Bible an awful lot, didn't he? You never read his letter from Birmingham, the jail in Birmingham? It's beautiful. We'll link to it. He was a Christian. The civil rights leaders from that generation, they used to argue that people should be judged not by their skin color, but by the content of their character. Again, to quote Martin Luther King. So why do liberal Democrats now, why today, in 2020, why do they seem to see nothing but color 24/7, all day long, every day, all week long? Why is that? They dine out on this stuff. They want racism to get worse. They fundraise on it. You know, even though black people are the first to see through this racist, pandering rot coming from the left.
I was just looking online today, like most of you, and what did I see? A bunch of Democrat politicians kneeling down, of which I have nothing to say about that because I am not an American. However, they were all having around their necks this colorful fabric, which I'm sure they put around their necks as some kind of mark or show of unity or solidarity with Black people. So in other words, they are putting forward the kente material or this colorful fabric they had around their necks as some kind of placating sign or symbol to show that they are not racist and they are together with Black people. Excuse me, dear Democrats, in your tokenism, you didn't wait to find out that this thing that you're hanging around your neck is not just some African uniform. It's actually the kente material. The kente belongs to the Ghanaian people, mainly the Ashanti tribe. Excuse me, Democrats, don't treat Africans like we're children.
I think America has come a long way in getting over the problems of race from a long time ago. I mean, really, a long way. We elected a president, Black president, not once but twice. Many of these cities that we're talking about are fully run by Black politicians, you know? I think this is just a lie. And I think that they're trying to do is make things worse now than they've ever been, because if racism went away, they don't have anything to campaign on. They can't raise the money they need. They don't have anything to say anymore. They need us at each other's throats. I'll tell you a quick story. One night back in 1915, a handful of ignorant buffoons decided that Dr. James W. Crump was not fit to live in St. Paul. They gathered outside of his home and they tried to intimidate his family, wanted him to move out, go to the other side of the tracks. Now, my grandfather, who at that time was a respected member of the planning committee for the city of St. Paul, we're going back a ways, he saw this going on out in the city and he walked over to old Dr. Crump's front porch, walked up next to him, stood by him side by side with Dr. Crump. And there he stood for the rest of the evening. I don't know what time it finally broke up, but the two of them, my grandfather and Dr. Crump, stood there until the mob got tired and went home. And who was Dr. Crump? You can Google him, check him out. He was a family doctor in St. Paul. He was one of the earliest African Americans admitted into the AMA, and he was my grandfather's friend and his neighbor. You see, that's the way it used to work, friends. That's the way I grew up. I don't know where this is coming from. You know, these little millennials, they go to school, they go to university, and they get their heads full of all this crap that everybody's a racist and don't even know it. Do you think that's going to help the Black community or any other community, the white community, anybody else, to fill people with hate like that? You're a hater and you don't even know it. See, that's not the way it used to be. And really, friends, I'm sorry, but how dare these people, how dare these leftist, racist people project their own racism on the rest of us? Because that's exactly what's going on. You know what they want to do? They want to divide us again. They want to reverse the clock. They want to go back in time. They want to pit blacks against whites and vice versa. They want to stir up fear and hate. And that's what they're trying to do. But we cannot let them get away with this.
I can't understand for the life of me what is going on right now in the city of Cincinnati. And I'm going to be here until these folks and the other folks are protected. Let me tell you something. There are people down here who are encouraging 14-year-old kids. These babies are 14 years old, man, and they're encouraging them to throw bottles at these cops. And these grown people are encouraging our babies to fight. This is not their fight.
You see, these people aren't our neighbors. These people aren't homegrown. We saw this here in Minneapolis. They were coming in by the truckload. We saw them out on the freeway driving in, you know, to help burn down our city. They weren't our friends. They weren't our neighbors. They weren't us. They're the pawns and the stooges of an international group that needs anarchy in America to fundamentally change America and to get our country, to get it out of the way of their new world order.
If you have any kind of brain, you know BLM is endorsed by the Soros in the Clinton family. If you have any kind of a brain, you know that those same people don't give a damn about you, don't give a damn about black people, don't give a damn. They're exploiting the black plight to make money off of you. They're using your emotions, and based off what has happened to you, they're using that against you so you can join these evil demonic people to help fight the people on the far right. They want, or not even the far right.
You know, and the only way they can pull this thing off in terms of defeating Trump is if they can goad him into bringing in the heavy artillery. And then suddenly we don't have one George Floyd. We have hundreds. It can't happen. So I would say let's be a little careful about telling Trump, hey, man, come on, get in there. Start breaking some heads up. No, I don't think it's going to work. But what's happening now is working, isn't it? They're standing back, looking at the chaos, and the whole country gets to see, and it's beginning to sputter and peter out exactly as it needs to. And besides, there's another way, friends, and that's really the point of the show. So much has been happening over the past couple of weeks, but I wanted to just talk about what is in our wheelhouse, which is the traditional Catholic position. It hasn't changed. This doesn't change anything. This only confirms the traditional Catholic counter-revolution over the past 50 years. We've been talking about this forever. People say it's just the traditional Latin Mass. No, it's not. It's the rise of the police state. It's the rise of the New World Order. It's the dethronement of Christ the King. Chaos in our societies. This is what we've been worried about. And there is another way. In fact, it's the only way. Stirring up violence and hatred in our streets is only possible, friends, if God's not around. If his churches are closed. If his priests are diddling the kids. If they've completely reoriented the church into the church of accompaniment, then it's going to be real easy to take down America because the strongest moral authority is going to be gone. It's not going to be there. And again, I'm not talking about a pious devotion here. I'm not your spiritual leader. I'm talking about the law of God that has formed the basis of our country's moral code for over 200 years. Do you ever wonder why, for example, in our law courts, we place our hand on the Bible and we swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help me God. You ever wonder what that's about? That's because the judge and the lawyers and the bailiffs, they can't possibly make you do the right thing if you don't have any fear of God. Every decent American, regardless of skin color, instinctively knows this is true, that without God's law, lawlessness is inevitable. And we must, at this point, friends, ask ourselves, how did this happen? How did our nation get so far removed from God and from his law that during a pandemic, the Catholic Church is closed? Old people were not allowed to receive Holy Communion or have Mass. You know, the priests went into hiding. That during race riots, our priests were not there. Our bishops had nothing to say. Locked up in their houses, letting it happen, because they knew if they went out in the streets, nobody would take them seriously.
You want to know what's wrong with our waterfront? It's the love of a lousy buck. It's making love of a buck, the cushy job, more important than the love of man. It's forgetting that every fella down here is your brother in Christ. But remember, Christ is always with you. Christ is in the shape-up, he's in the hatch, he's in the unit. He's kneeling right here beside Dugan. And he's staying with all of you. If you do it to the least of mine, you do it to me.
They're a bunch of pedophiles now. They've lost their moral authority. How did this happen? The folks burning the cities, friends. Who disenfranchised them? Neo-Catholics, conservatives, whatever you want to call yourselves, please open your eyes. This didn't happen recently. Who silenced the Christian moral authority in America and all across the world? Surely not Black Lives Matter, which started, I think, in 2014. They really aren't the problem here. Who wrecked the altars and the thrones that for centuries stood like stone fortresses against the very paganism that today has found its way to the heights of power in government, in education, and entertainment? Who did that? Who's responsible for that? We're looking at looting and vandalism in our streets right now, but what about the looting and the vandalism that destroyed the sanctuaries of God 50 years ago? What about that? When they brought bulldozers in and they defaced the altar and they tore out the statues. Some anarchists right now, they want to get rid of the police. But what about the spiritual anarchists who began disbanding the priesthood 50 years ago? What about them? When do we turn around and look at them and say, why did you do this? When do we go back and undo those disastrous policies? There's the same globalist agenda that would now incite young people to tear down statues, the statues of historical figures in the cities today. This all started when the modernists went in and started tearing out statues of saints and the Virgin Mary from the Catholic churches 50 years ago, putting the whole world on notice that we are going to absent ourselves now, that we have called a truce, that we are surrendering to the world, the flesh, and the devil. The end, friends, the end of law and order in our world did not start in Minneapolis last month. It started in Rome at least a half century ago. And what's happening now is just the chickens coming home to roost. And I don't say this to make you depressed. I say this to give you reason to fight. This is something we can change. We can go back to tradition. We can beg our priests, please go back to sanity. Go back to the Latin traditional mass, traditional liturgies, traditional catechisms. Bring back the code of conduct based on Christ's law, based on the church's law, based on the law of God and the law of nature. Bring it back. Stop with the kumbaya. Stop with the interfaith ecumenical BS that's left everyone wondering if truth even exists anymore, thanks to the policies of the modernist infiltrators of the Catholic Church. Now, these people want the head of Donald Trump, don't they? That's what a lot of this is about. Just as they came for the head of Benedict XVI, and for essentially the same reason. Benedict was trying a little bit to see if he could make the Catholic Church maybe Catholic again, and they crucified him for that. Donald Trump is thinking maybe he can sort of make America sane, great again, and they're going to crucify him from that. But guess what? It's the same forces at work, friends, in Rome and in Washington, D.C. right now. Same forces. They blew up the city of God so they could disenfranchise Christian soldiers everywhere, who would eventually burn down the city of man, and that's what we're watching right now. Total anarchy, total chaos, without Christ, without his church. Bring it back. Bring back the Catholic Church, friends. At this moment, black and white Americans alike are looking on with horror at what the pawns of the New World Order, the Christophobic New World Order, are doing to our country. But this is not us. This is not you, black America. This is not us, white America. This is an illusion. This is a lie. They are turning us all against each other for another reason. Because America, like the traditional Catholic Church, stands directly in the way of a globalist agenda, of the rise of a new world order. I would say of the rise of an anti-Christian order. And whether your skin is black or white, it doesn't matter. We cannot let them succeed. Turn off the TV. Take off the damn mask. We know what they're trying to do, but there are millions of us decent, God-fearing, family-raising Americans who can stop them. Not by sending in federal troops, but by coming together, by standing together as one nation under God. This is a moment where even our theology will not create an impasse. If you're trying to follow Jesus Christ, then this is a moment where we take to the streets, not in a phony ecumenical way, but in a way of brotherhood of Americans who want to save their homeland, save their children, save their country. We come together, we stand together. We can unite all the clans in America right now. All those who are interested in ending this madness. Love God, friends, above all else. And love your neighbor as yourself. And the cities will stop burning. The churches will open. The babies will live. And all Americans will be able to breathe again. It's the only way. I'm Michael Mann for Remnant TV. Thanks for listening. God bless you. Stay safe. And we'll see you next week.